For 20 years, Adeline Foster believed the man she loved had abandoned her without a word. For 20 years, Wyatt Cole believed she had chosen someone else over him. Neither of them knew the truth, that a single letter, lost all those years ago, had stolen the life they were meant to share, and neither of them knew that fate was about to give them one last chance to find their way back to each other. This is the story of a love that survived 20 years of silence, a misunderstanding that broke two hearts, and the letter that came home at last. If you've ever wondered what might have been, if you've ever loved someone across the distance of years, this story is for you. Tap subscribe before we begin. For everyone who believes that true love, real love, is never truly lost, only waiting. Now let me take you to two farms in a green valley and the young love that time nearly stole forever. Adeline Foster, Addie, everyone called her, grew up on a farm in a wide green valley, and the boy on the farm next door was named Wyatt Cole. They had known each other their whole lives. As children, they ran barefoot through the same fields, fished in the same creek, and built forts in the same hayloft. As they grew older, that childhood friendship deepened into something else, something neither of them ever had to name, because it had always simply been true. By the time they were 20, Addie and Wyatt were deeply, completely in love. It was the kind of love that everyone in the valley smiled about, the kind that seemed written in the stars. They walked the fence line between their two farms every evening at sunset, hand in hand. And they made the quiet plans that young people in love make. The wedding they would have, the farm they would build, the whole long life they would spend together. Wyatt had even spoken to Addie's father, and the two families had begun, softly, to dream of joining their land and their futures. Everything seemed certain. Everything seemed golden. And then, in a single hard season, everything changed. It began with Addie's father. He fell gravely ill that autumn, suddenly and severely, and the Foster farm was thrown into crisis. With her father unable to work, the farm began to fail. Debts piled up. Addie, the only child, had to step into her father's place, working from dawn to dark to keep the family and the farm from going under. There was no time for sunset walks anymore, no time for dreaming, only survival. And at the very same time, a crisis struck the Cole family too. Word came from far away that Wyatt's grandfather, who owned a large farm in another state, had died, and had left that farm to Wyatt's father, on the condition that the family come and run it. It was a lifeline for the Coles, who had been struggling themselves, but it meant leaving the valley. It meant Wyatt's whole family packing up and moving hundreds of miles away, and soon. Wyatt was torn in two. He couldn't abandon his family, who needed him to help run the new farm, but he couldn't imagine a life without Addie either. And Addie, drowning in her own family's crisis, her father gravely ill, could not simply leave everything and go with him. The night before the Coles left, Wyatt and Addie stood at the fence line one last time, and they made a promise. Wyatt would go and help his family get the new farm running. And as soon as he could, he would write to Addie and send for her, and they would find a way to be together again. They would not let distance end what they had. They swore it to each other under the stars, and then Wyatt was gone, and Addie was left alone with her sick father and her failing farm, holding on to that single promise. He would write. He would send for her. She only had to wait. So she waited. Weeks passed. Addie worked herself to exhaustion caring for her father and saving the farm, and every single day she watched the road for the mail, waiting for Wyatt's letter. The letter that would tell her he still loved her, that his plan was in place, that it was time to come to him at last. But the letter never came. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months, and still there was no word from Wyatt, no letter, no message, nothing at all. And slowly, agonizingly, the silence began to break Addie's heart. She could not understand it. He had promised, he had sworn it, and yet the silence stretched on and on, until at last Addie was forced to believe the only thing that seemed to make sense, that Wyatt, out there in his new life, with his new farm and new prospects, had simply moved on, that he had forgotten her, that the promises made at the fence line had been the promises of a boy who, once he was gone, had found it easier to let her go. It broke something in Addie that never fully healed, but she was proud, and she would not beg. If Wyatt had chosen to forget her, she would not chase after a man who didn't want her. So she swallowed her heartbreak, and she poured herself into her father and her farm, and she never wrote to him either. And so the silence became permanent. What Addie never knew, what she could not have known, was that Wyatt had kept his promise. Far away, as soon as he and his family had arrived and begun to settle the new farm, Wyatt had sat down and poured his his whole heart into a letter to Addie. In it, he told her that he loved her more than ever, that the new farm was thriving, and that he was ready. He asked her to come to him, to marry him, to build their life together at last. He told her exactly where to come and when, and he sealed that letter with everything he felt, and he sent it with all his hope. And then he waited for her answer. But the answer never came, because the letter never arrived. The letter was lost. Whether it fell victim to the unreliable mails of that time, sent the long distance between them, or was simply misdelivered and forgotten in some forgotten corner, it never reached Addie's hands. Wyatt's whole heart, his proposal, his plan for their future, all of it vanished somewhere on the long road between them, and Addie never knew it had ever been written. And so Wyatt, too, was left to wait for a reply that would never come. Day after day, he watched for Addie's answer, certain she would write back, certain she would come. But as the silence stretched on, he was forced to his own heartbroken conclusion. He had heard, through the thin thread of valley gossip that still reached him, that Addie's farm had been saved, that a hard-working young man had been helping the Fosters through their crisis. And in his hurt and his distance, Wyatt came to believe the only thing that seemed to explain her silence, that Addie had chosen to stay, had chosen the farm, had perhaps chosen someone else, and had decided to let him go. Two people who loved each other completely, each came to believe that the other had abandoned them, and a single lost letter, drifting somewhere in the world, had quietly stolen the entire life they were meant to share. The years passed, the way years do. Addie stayed on the farm. Her father eventually recovered, though he was never strong again, and Addie ran the farm and cared for her parents until they passed. She grew from a heartbroken young woman into a strong, quiet, respected woman of the valley. Suitors came over the years, good men, kind men, but Addie never married any of them. Something in her had closed the day she accepted that Wyatt was gone, and she never quite found the way to open it again. She told herself she was content, alone on her land, but every evening, out of an old habit she could not break, she still walked the fence line at sunset. Alone now, always alone. And, far away, Wyatt built a life too. He worked the family farm and made it prosper, and in time he married a good woman and raised a family. He loved his wife and his children, and he built a full and decent life. But there was a quiet room in his heart that he never opened, a door he kept always closed, behind which lived the memory of a girl in a green valley and the promise they had made under the stars. His wife passed away some years later, and his children grew and went out into the world, and Wyatt found himself, in the autumn of his life, alone with his memories at last. 20 years after that night at the fence line, fate finally intervened. Wyatt's elderly parents had long since passed, but the old coal farm in the valley, the farm of his childhood next door to Addie's, had remained in the family all those years, rented out and looked after from afar. And now an aging Wyatt, alone and drawn by something he couldn't quite name, made a decision. He would go home. He would return to the valley of his childhood, to the old farm next door to the girl he had never stopped loving, if only to see the place one last time. He did not even know if Addie would still be there. He assumed, after all these years, that she was long married, long gone, that the farm next door belonged to strangers now. He came home not for her, he told himself, but for the memory of a life he had lost. And on his first evening back in the valley, as the sun sank low and golden over the fields he had not seen in 20 years, Wyatt walked out of an old and aching habit to the fence line between the two farms, and there, walking toward him along that same fence, in the same golden light, was Adeline Foster. They stopped, both of them, and stared at each other across the fence and across 20 years, hardly able to believe what they were seeing. She was older now, and so was he, but they knew each other at once, the way you always know the face you once loved most in all the world. For a long moment, neither of them could speak. "Addie," Wyatt finally managed, his voice breaking on her name. "You're still here." "Where else would I be?" she said, and there was old pain in her voice, 20 years of it. "You're the one who left. You're the one who never wrote." And Wyatt felt the ground shift beneath him. "Never wrote?" he said. "Addie, I wrote to you the moment I could. I sent for you. I asked you to marry me, to come and build our life. I poured my whole heart into that letter, and I sent it, and I waited for your answer every single day. And when it never came, I thought you had chosen to stay. I thought you'd found someone else. I thought you had forgotten me." Addie stood frozen, the color draining from her face. "I never got a letter," she whispered. "Wyatt, I swear to you, I never got any letter. I waited. I watched that road every day for months. When nothing came, I thought you had forgotten me. I thought you'd moved on and left me behind." And there, at the fence line, in the golden light of a sunset 20 years too late, the truth finally came clear between them. The letter, the lost letter. Wyatt had kept his promise after all. He had written, he had proposed, he had asked her to come. And that letter, carrying the whole of their future, had simply never arrived. For 20 years, each of them had believed the other had abandoned them, and it had all of it, been a terrible, heartbreaking mistake. They stood in silence as the enormity of it washed over them, the wasted years, the lives lived apart, the love that had been stolen from them both by a single letter lost somewhere on the long road between two hearts. 20 years, Addie said softly, tears running down her face. "We lost 20 years. "I know," Wyatt said, and he was weeping too. "I know. But Addie—" He reached across the fence, the same fence they had stood at as young lovers, and he took her weathered hand in his, just as he had all those years ago. "We're both still here, against every odd. After all these years, we're both still here, and we're both still free. Maybe we lost 20 years, but we don't have to lose the ones we have left." And Addie, who had guarded her broken heart for 2 decades, who had never let anyone through that closed door, looked into the eyes of the only man she had ever loved, and she felt that long closed door swing open at last. "No," she said, her voice trembling with 20 years of held-back love. "No, we don't." They did not waste another day. There was no need for a long courtship, no need to wonder or to wait. They had already spent a lifetime loving each other from across a silence neither of them had chosen. Now, at last, the silence was broken. The truth was known, and there was nothing left standing between them. That autumn, in the same green valley where they had fallen in love as children, Adeline Foster and Wyatt Cole were finally married beneath the same stars they had once made their promises under. They were older now, their hair gone gray, their faces lined with all the years apart. But when they looked at each other, they saw the same young lovers they had always been, given back to each other at last. They joined their 2 farms, just as their families had once dreamed, all those years ago. And they spent the years they had left walking the fence line together at sunset, hand in hand, the way they always should have, the way they always would have, if only one letter had found its way home. And though they mourned the 20 years the lost letter had stolen from them, they came to see in time that their love had survived something almost no love survives. 20 years of silence, 20 years of heartbreak, 20 years of each believing the other was gone. And still, when they came face to face again, that love had been waiting, exactly where they had left it, as strong and true as the day they first felt it. Some might call it a tragedy, all those wasted years. But Addie and Wyatt did not. They chose instead to be grateful that the truth had come home at last, grateful for every single day they were given at the end, and grateful most of all for a love that had proven itself stronger than time, stronger than distance, and stronger than the cruelest of misunderstandings. The letter had been lost for 20 years, but the love it carried had not been lost at all. It had only been waiting, and in the end it found its way home.